Officials of the European Union and the International Monetary Fund have both warned about serious energy crisis and economic impacts that Europe may face for losing Russian natural gas. The EU has slapped a total of 5 rounds of sanctions on Russia since the conflict between Russia and Ukraine erupted about 2 months ago. Those sanctions are aimed at crippling the Russian economy. They've not achieved the desired effect, though, according to analysts. Instead, the blowback of the sanction measures is eating into the European economy, adding to stagflation risks. As EU officials are working a 6th round of sanctions, some officials are particularly concerned about the impact to Europe's energy security from imposing sanctions against Russian energy imports. We have joining us now geopolitical security analyst at SBM Intelligence, Confidence Makari. He's been waiting with us in London. Thank you so much for staying with us, and thank you for your patience. Now, according to, sorry, he's in Lagos. I'm sorry, I just transported you to London virtually. And now, according to PwC CEO survey, among the top worries of CEOs are cybersecurity and geopolitical conflicts. Let's talk about how Nigeria is faring with cybersecurity risks right now, given that that is also an issue with this war going on in Ukraine.
Yeah, the thing about cybersecurity in Nigeria, you should know, is that it's mostly a private sector-led enterprise. We, like you said, PwC did a survey on it. I think very recently, risk management professionals in Nigeria came together for the outlook for the year and concluded on the same thing. Thankfully, one of the government parastatals were part of the meeting that's talking about Bank of Industry, who was also sent officials down there. But the thing about cybersecurity in Nigeria is that just like we are in the global scheme of things, economic shocks as well as other things affect us. Cybersecurity is also something that Nigeria is very prone to. As I said earlier, it's something that many private firms have been taking into account. So for the government side, it's not really something that we've seen enough actions towards. There was a House of Reps Select Committee that visited Data 6 in Lagos to try to infuse some kind of, to move government online. There were a whole lot of talks using companies like Galaxy Backbone and several others. But in the grand scheme of things, the whole idea of making Nigeria's cybersecurity risk less in case of a cyber attack has not really been that up and doing. The other day we saw how much the reports about alleged hacking at the National Identification Management Commission, where data of thousands of Nigerians were left open buckets on the internet. So we've not really made too much progress. Yes, you could say that the government has been very slow about it. Even private organizations have also taken a hit. We saw about a year ago how both the ride-hailing app was hacked. But so in conclusion, what I'm saying is that it's not really been something that in great sensitization has been able to get great results. Yes, the sensitization is there, but the actions have been quite lacking.
Yeah, indeed. And I just want to encourage you to just stay on. We'll take a short break. We'll come back. This conversation continues after. Just stay with us. Welcome back to our continued coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Geopolitical and security analyst at SBM Intelligence, Confidence Makari, is still with me. He was talking about, the geopolitical conflicts and the cyber risks, especially to Nigeria right now. Confidence, those sanctions are playing a big role right now in the commodities markets. Food prices have surged, not just in Ukraine, because of the Ukraine war. These analysts are giving warnings about, what the future could be like. And they're saying we need to be prepared for shortage, a lot of it. What conversations are ongoing regarding, buffering, the impacts of this crisis on food?
Yeah, before the conflicts, we had about 800 million hungry people in 2020, and that number is about to be rising. And before 2020, we had about 100 million more hungry people, which took the number to about 1 billion. So food insecurity has always been existing. It's something driven by conflicts, extreme weather events, pest disease, and everything. So currently, we are talking about the conflicts in Ukraine and its impact on the commodities market. So some of the commodities that are mostly affected are wheat, maize, edible oils, most importantly, fertilizer. So most of the discussion has largely been around its impact on wheat. Russia is the world's largest exporter of wheat, accounting for about 18%, or which of course is nearly 20% of global exports. And then for 2021, and then you have Ukraine that accounts for about 10%. Now it's important to get into context that they are not the largest producers of wheat, that's China and India, but they are the largest exporters. So about 35% of the world's population relies on wheat. So as the primary staple diet. So it's a very significant shock. So currently, if I'm not mistaken, as about March, we had an inflation on the commodity, which was about 50% higher than in February and almost 80% higher than just 2021. So also maize is also following that way. Since February 24th, we've seen about 25 to 30% increase in price of maize, which above February levels, which over a year it was. Between last year and now, we've seen a 37% increase. So we have those two important commodities going up. But thankfully, rice is not really affected at the moment because, which of course is quite different from the situation 14, 15 years ago during the last food crisis. So global price of rice is still about 17% lower than it was in January 2021. So there's a little bit of good news there. If you look at shipping through the Black Sea, it stands still and high global wheat prices. So we can still expect countries to sell more wheat. So in terms of preservation of food, I think we still have a little bit of good news. So we don't really have that much of a global wheat shortage fall. I think it's what we currently have is a supply issue. So I do think that there's not wheat on the planet, and then the planting season in the summer would, I think, take up much of the production for other countries that are looking to export, of countries like India and China that I've mentioned. So the thing is, many countries will have to adjust. So for instance, if you have a country like Nigeria that depends on Ukraine and Russia for its wheat imports, it has to start looking at external exporters. But that's for the commodities, the food commodities. For the fertilizer, it's another question entirely. We're seeing countries like India and its neighbors not coming out outrightly to condemn Russia's invasion because of how much they depend on the urea NPK from Russia. So it's not all that doom and gloom. Russia and Belarus account for 20% of the global fertilizer exports, and you already know that before the war, 20% before the war, global fertilizer exports were already high because of higher oil prices and the price of urea. So it's not exactly that much of a bad news. On one hand, we have some good news in terms of some commodity crops, but I do think that when we get to middle of the year, we start seeing a lot more other alternatives. The initial shocks we had was because many people were taking on our wares and we were unable to prepare for such eventuality. So by the middle of the year, I think we will start having a lot of backup. So inflation would, I think, go down considerably.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, the climate change may also play a role in, the impact on food around the world. With many days of rain predicted for Nigeria, I know the planting season might be a little of a challenge. But let's talk about oil prices now, which have remained volatile, but they're still away from the previous highs. What's your outlook for the oil market? The demands, the complaints seem to wane on the market, right?
Yeah, the thing about oil prices is that there are some people that are going to get a windfall for it, but Nigeria is actually not among the list of those countries because of obvious reasons like fuel subsidy, debates, and several other things. But I think throughout the entirety of this invasion and perhaps going into May 6th, that the Russians hope to wrap the whole special military operations, as we call it up, I think oil prices will continue to remain high. There's a pattern here. Each time there is a Russian involvement in the war, outside this war as well, we've always had oil is from at least $85 per barrel. The Russian invasion of Georgia in 2008, South Ossetia War, the one in Syria, and several others, and then this one in Ukraine have always ushered in high oil prices. So this one in Ukraine is not really different, and I think it's going to continue to remain in that particular around that particular area between 90 and 100. But even beyond oil, there is an even more urgent conversation around gas. So as the European Union continues to look for ways to diversify its options away from Russian energy, we are seeing more actors come into the picture. People like Algeria and perhaps Nigeria. But the thing is, we don't export as much gas as Algeria does, and Algeria is closest to Europe between both countries. So we're seeing Algeria and some other countries take the initiative. But if this way is to continue, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more countries like Nigeria and Algeria entering into the partnership that already exists to leverage on the situation to export more gas to Europe.
So we already established that the global economy has been impacted by this war, so has Nigeria as well. But what sort of policies should the policymakers in Nigeria be doing to help protect the economy from these shocks?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that the economies that are most vulnerable to external shocks are the ones that are export dependent. Nigeria's primary exports is oil, and then some sort of its. If you compare oil with other forms of exports, it fails largely in comparison. So on paper, Nigeria is not necessarily supposed to be feeling much impact on external shocks. But looking at the import side, given that we import a lot of things, and some of the other people who produce some of these things also have been impacted by the invasion of Ukraine, we would have to be looking basically at producing some of these things we import. I will look at fertilizer, for instance, as my sole example for this discussion. There was an agreement between Nigeria and Morocco to set up fertilizer production plants in Nigeria within the last 1 year. But over the past few weeks, we've not really seen that initiative materialize. And to be honest, we do not exactly think that Morocco's fertilizer plants in Nigeria is going to cover up for what we get from far away Eastern Europe. But at least it should be a step. But unfortunately, we haven't seen that much activity surrounding that area. So if push comes to shove to insulate the Nigerian economy from the problem of getting fertilizer, urea, NPK, and the rest of them because of what's happening in Eastern Europe, you could also partner with, you could also get similar initiatives like the one you got in Morocco, with other fertilizer producing economies to, well, if not necessarily set up shop in Nigeria, at least to facilitate easy transportation of fertilizer into the country.
Right.
So one of the key ways of insulating somebody, an economy from shock, is by getting a lot other options. And yes, the options exist. We've seen it with Nigeria in terms of arms imports, when in 2014 the US refused to sell weapons because when it told Israel to not sell Cobra helicopters to the Nigerian government, it simply looked east to Pakistan, Russia, and China to get its weapons. And then in the Buhari administration, it's changed course and went back to the US and to the US is not willing to sell. The East will be willing to sell.
Confidence.
We should also adopt the same approach by trying not to hedge our bets on one person.
Confidence. Thank you so much. I mean, you have broken it all down for us, and really appreciate your being with us this morning. Thank you again for joining us on the program.
Thank you once again for having me.